We begin the event. It is exactly 12:30, and it's really very important for us to try to stick to the timetable. So, as the opener and introducer of the event, I'm going to try to do that in the 10 minutes I have been allocated. My name is Dan Remini, and I am co-chairing this webinar today with Professor Sharan Singh. Sharan Singh is professor in the School of Computing in the University of South Africa. I am based in the UK. I am semi-retired. My academic affiliations at the moment are that I am an honorary professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and an extraordinary professor at the University of the Western Cape. The word extraordinary professor is not well known to many people, and it is often thought to be special in some way. Well, it's special only in as far as extraordinary professors are those who get no pay. So there you go. I'm here today basically as part of the ACI team, the Academic Conference International team. We run conferences around the world, which we've been doing for nearly 30 years. And sometimes we run as many as 20 conferences in the same year. Not at the moment. Until last year, they were all physical conferences where we actually traveled to different countries. But since the arrival of COVID, they have now been basically online conferences. But nonetheless, they have served an extremely good function and have been well attended. I'd like to just draw your attention to the timetable. There are two streams. So after this introduction, you need to choose whether you should go to stream A or to stream B. I will be chairing stream A, and Sharan Singh will be chairing stream B. At 2 o'clock, we will then come back together in room 1. And Louise, who is the master of ceremonies, is going to break us up into small groups of 6. And we will have 2 opportunities of 15 minutes each of mixing with 6 different people, the 2 different small group sessions, to discuss what we've been listening to and to exchange our views on the topic. We'll then get back together again for a 10-minute plenary session where we will chat about what we've been hearing, and then we'll move into the final 15 minutes, which is the summary and the goodbye. Now, before getting into the specific presentations, I'd just like to give you a little bit of history about how this event has come about. Shortly, a little bit less than 2 years ago, I became aware that there was an enormous amount of criticism of the university community in the media generally, be it in the press or be it on television, and it seemed to be worldwide. And I thought it would be useful to have a investigation into that. So I put out a call for chapters for a book on the topic of the University of the Future. This resulted in my getting 70 abstracts for chapters, and having sorted out the reviewing of these papers and general organization, a book was published which had 17 chapters, authored by 23 different authors from 15 countries, and the book was eventually published at the beginning of last year. The print was hardly dry when the COVID crisis arrived. And it seemed to me that much of what was said in that book, although it was perfectly relevant, needed to be recouched in the context of where we now stand amongst this dreadful crisis. So a second call for chapters went out, which was to produce a different book. It's not a second edition, it's a different book, and it's called Responding to COVID-19, the University of the Future. And in due course, another book was produced with some extra chapters, some extra authors, some extra country involvement, etc. Now, in both of these books, a chapter was written by the then Vice Chancellor of UNISA, now the former Vice Chancellor of UNISA, as he has just retired, Professor Mandla Makhanya, and I got into conversation with him, and it was decided we should run an event to discuss where the universities are and where the universities are going. He then introduced me to Professor Moketsi Luseka, and he is the UNISA chair at he is the UNESCO chair at UNISA, and that is how UNESCO has become involved in this webinar. So what we're going to do today is we're going to explore these issues. 4 of the speakers are, and 5 of the speakers are authors or editors of the book. The others are professors from UNISA, and we have put together a, as you can see, a pretty balanced program for you to explore. Now, in getting to the starting point, I would just like to say that I am absolutely convinced that the university system is completely essential to our society. I have heard people say universities are going to become redundant. And if you look over my shoulder, I put up a book here called The End of College, which says that college is American for university, basically, or for a certain level of university anyway. That universities are going to become redundant. This is complete nonsense. Universities are absolutely essential to our society. The demand for higher education has never been as great as it is today. And there are so many fantastic opportunities in the higher education sector. At the same time, it is very clear to me that the university sector needs to really look at itself very carefully. There needs to be a careful examination of whether or not we are performing in the right way with regards to a whole load of different issues. The ones that come to mind immediately are finance, and that ranges from fees to remunerations to way things are funded, etc., etc. Another one comes to mind is the curriculum. Curriculum reform is really important, and it hasn't been addressed adequately. We have taken on board the fact that research is important, but we've made it so important that sometimes it appears that it can be interfering with maybe the most central issue of all of the universities, which is to prepare people to live a fuller and more satisfactory life. One of the problems seems to me is that universities have, by their own success, become large, complex entities, multi-product, multifunctional, almost any dimension you wish to choose. Many of them become multi-campus organizations with branches all over the world. I think it is now time for us to think very much more carefully about what it is we are trying to achieve with the universities and how this needs to be taken forward into the future. Now, that gives me, on my chronometer, about 1.5 minutes to say, the way this will operate now is that those of you who wish to participate in Stream B need to leave Stream A. You must come out of Stream A, completely leave it. You can't be in 2 streams on one system at the same time. And then relink yourself into Stream B. You will all have had joining instructions, so you'll have the link for Stream B, and you'll also have the password for Stream B. So those of you who wish to go to Stream B, would you be kind enough to do so now? Sharon Singh should be there waiting to get that stream going. I'm going to stay here and will chair Stream A. So for those of you who are leaving, I'll see you later. Bye-bye for now. Well, one of the tricks with regards to online conferences and webinars, etc., is to keep the timetable going at the appropriate rate so that everybody is in sync and that we all get through our presentations in a reasonably ordered sort of way. The Stream A now begins with a presentation from Professor Mandla Makanya. Professor Makanya, as many of you will know, is the retired Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa. On the joining instructions or on the invitation to this webinar, there was a thumbnail bio of Professor Makanya, and it reads as follows. He is the retired Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa and a prominent opponent of higher education, leadership and advocacy, nationally, continentally and globally, more especially as it pertains to open distance e-learning. Professor Makanya, would you like to take over and present your paper?
No, thank you very much, Prof. Remenyi. Let me greet all the delegates as well. It's good to be part and parcel of today's conference. I've been given, obviously, a topic that I will now be just expressing my views on, in a brief sense of the word, with the minutes that I have at my disposal. So, colleagues, let me start off then by saying that the only real comparison that we can make with the current pandemic is that of 1918 Spanish flu, which was far more deadly in terms of its human toll, coming as it did at the tail end of the Great War, when the world had been battered by almost 4 years of disruption, deprivation, and destruction. What is different with this event, though, is that in just over a century, our world is a very different place. Unlike the Spanish flu, the COVID struck, humankind had been enjoying a prolonged and unparalleled period of global peace, prosperity, and well-being, driven exponentially by increasingly sophisticated technology and digitization that rendered us all citizens of a hyper-connected world. But 1 year ago, in our country, South Africa, which in our case, just to be exact, on the 26th of March, that particular world that we had always known fell apart and changed everything irrevocably. When we all went into hard lockdown, today we're in the midst of that uninvited disruption. And its impact on education reflects that painful process of adjustment, of out-of-the-box thinking that is required at the strategic level in our universities and in the sector as a whole, if we aim to prevail, but also to optimally move confidently into the future and do so and flourishing in that particular space. Now, in just reflecting on my few remarks, I'll just use UNISA as an example when it comes to this strategic dimension of our response to the COVID disruption. I'm confident that my own experience as the then Vice Chancellor, finds its echoes in most institutions of higher learning across the globe. In so doing, let me then touch on 5 aspects. First, ensuring health and safety. Secondly, understanding our context in terms of risk and imagination. And then the third one, reimagining the university and revising the strategy for sustainability and relevance, where we spoke about reconfiguring the as-is situation and then agreeing on the best business model that will result in institutional sustainability. And then the fourth one, putting the academy at the center. And then finally, leading transformation. Now, of course, the first imperative at all our institutions was to ensure the health and safety of all the staff and students, as well as the infrastructure. In our case, we immediately put in place emergency regulations based on state guidelines and protocols to this end, which entail sanitizing all the buildings, ensuring supplies of hand sanitizers, and communicating clearly and frequently, using all the means of communication to both staff and students regarding emerging developments and concomitant measures that are to be taken. But it soon became evident that we would have to introduce the practice of staff working from home for all but essential staff, which in our case included security and cleaning services, as well as the essential ICT and human resources staff. We did not and could not hesitate to do so. Now, as an open distance and e-learning institution, we were impelled and propelled into accelerating our green move into fully online learning if we aim to survive and show our sustainability, but also to secure the academic year. We knew that we had much of the infrastructure and experience, but what we had not bargained on was the sudden shift to working from home. It brought with it many challenges that required innovative, bold, and visionary thinking to overcome. More of that I'll just reflect on at a later stage. But for now, let me rather say we see the rain, we shot for the rainbow instead of just seeing the rain, as it were. So in this process of ensuring health and safety, there has been ongoing kind of commitment from our side, where we had to adapt in real time as the pandemic continued its trail of destruction. It has been and remains hugely expensive, but it is a non-negotiable cost for which we've received some relief from government, but for which also we have had to initially bank on the unbudgeted use of our own funds. Now, this is a testament to our resilience and sound financial management and stewardship, which we have to continue to deal with this challenge in an effective manner, but do so successfully. So we have all of it in hand and will remain so until such time that we have all clear from the side of the government. Now, I must say that we happen to be in a fortunate position as and when we moved in this particular space, because we then conducted this ongoing contextualization of the institution within the context of the global, continental, and national space. This required widespread and in-depth trend of identifying, analyzing, but also aligning our institutional risk identification and mitigation strategy. This practice ensured once members of COVID surfaced in the Northern Hemisphere, they were detected, as were the immediate impact and actions of the virus on higher education institutions in those regions. The 6 months advance warning, if you like to say so, enabled us from this part of the world to anticipate and prepare ourselves, at least mentally and emotionally, in advance of our own government's pronouncements and regulations, ensuring a sound knowledge of our context, which allowed the decision-made process to be evidence-based so that we could not conjecture on assumptions, which under the current circumstances are very easily shaped by emotions. So armed with this contextualization and a deeply entrenched understanding of the role and value of the university, nationally and continentally in this instance, as a university, we were better positioned and more prepared than many to make these necessary strategic decisions that soon became inevitable in terms of the reality. So while the COVID disruption brought with its anxiety and uncertainty, it also brought with it an unparalleled historic opportunity to reimagine our university in ways that would have been unimaginable just 6 months previously. We, from the context of leadership and all our stakeholders, inclusive of the council, that will be referred to as boards in other cases, we agree that in order to ensure the institution's sustainability, that our students will not lose their academic year, we'll have to accelerate quite drastically our move into fully online institution. This was, in my view, an incredibly bold and visionary move, which immediately entailed the total determination of the institutions as is and the to-be statuses. In its testament to the caliber of our staff, that within a few short weeks, we had completed this comprehensive undertaking. The priority areas that had to change included the service delivery, that is the business model, through student work from application to graduation, efficiency and effectiveness of our all internal processes, the efficient and effective application of technology, the strategy for devices for both staff and students over the short, medium, and long term, and then the health and safety for both staff and students, then the staff in terms of the changing recruitment, remuneration, competency requirements, and other staff-related processes, the reassessment of our infrastructure strategy in line with fully online needs and capacities, the financial modeling that will demonstrate the feasibility of the envisaged model, the appropriate governance framework, policies, and procedures, ensuring the relevance and quality of our courseware. Now, this exercise paved the way for the approval across the board, right from our internal structures to Senate, right up to Council, of this exciting move into fully online processes, which then resulted immediately in us moving in that direction when it comes to examinations. We moved directly into ensuring that all our transactional processes were fully online immediately. Bearing in mind that all of this was happening while we were working from home with a much reduced staff complement, it is quite remarkable that what can be achieved when there is a will and where circumstance so demand is something that under normal circumstances can never be anticipated. So the first fully online examinations in May, June of last year were all successful, proving that both staff and students were equal to the task under those severely constrained circumstances. The huge stumbling blocks, though, relating to the internet access and data provision were dealt with decisively, where both staff and students were then provided with data bundles as a temporary measure as we were moving towards ensuring that we have a more permanent system that we're putting in place for them to have access to these gadgets and facilities without any pain. So the construction of this particular process is ongoing, and I can tell you there is no looking back. And it will be true to say at this point that this was taking a huge leap in terms of our strategy, where as a university we crossed the proverbial Rubicon, as it were. We know that despite the arguments and concerns that were raised previously by our staff and students, we have actually done something that we are proud of at this point. Currently, I can say we are operating successfully as a fully online institution, of course, with the challenges that one cannot shake off almost immediately overnight, that we have to deal with as the institution moves into the future. So, of course, we have to accept that this is work in progress. But I can say that we've reached a really tough stage in our strategy implementation, where policies are to be recrafted to ensure that the implementation of difficult choices is appropriately consulted and legitimized. I speak here of workforce upskilling and redesign, which was in line with our own stakeholder approach that had to be consultative. Otherwise, we'll have run the risk of being just kicked out of the environment to say we're introducing something that can never work. So it will be remiss of me then not to mention the critical importance of communication as a key tool in student and staff support in this entire process of strategy revision and implementation. Ongoing blanket communication is manifestly important, and it is a vital tool in the transformation process. all communication platforms should be utilized and you should do so frequently. Now, all of this reimagining, strategizing, and transformation would be quite pointless, though, if we do not understand changing learner expectations, the changing workplace demands, and in that context, that we needed an agile institution that will facilitate a genuinely flexible and relevant teaching and learning space where the approach will obviously show a significant shift from that which we had to that which we had to introduce. So any strategy will of necessity have to incorporate the simultaneous revision of courseware to accommodate not only the institutional strategic transformation towards this decolonized and Africanized form of the content, in our case as a university in our courseware, but also its ongoing relevance and quality for our graduates who must somehow navigate a world which we currently offer some kind of little clarity or certainty.
Hello,
other than our own need as a university to say we are there for lifelong learning, for upskilling our staff and students, but also for ensuring that the knowledge that they gain will guarantee that they can move into the future with comfort, without any fear that they might not necessarily function in a manner that will help them to eke out their own living beyond the university kind of presence. But we can only do so with that kind of comfort that you have your own staff, particularly the academic component, that is your scholars, to be on the driving seat of this particular process, primarily because of the nature of the environment that we are talking about in this. And we can do so with that level of courage and determination. And I think with those kinds of approaches, we are okay. Thank you so much, Prof.
I'm terribly sorry. No problem at all. Your enthusiasm is absolutely contagious, and thank you very much. I've enjoyed that very much. I'm sorry I had to interrupt, but we have to move ahead and top of the hour. Now look, there's 3 minutes left. Now I have a burning question I'd like to ask you, and that is that online instruction, if it is simply a matter of taking the old way of doing it and sticking it into some product like Zoom, does not seem to be adequate. It seems to me that to run an online university, you have to take the curriculum and you have to re-envisage it in a different way, so that the online tools will actually deliver what is intended. To what extent have you been able to get, and this is a big problem because of academic freedom, etc., lecturers, etc., wanting to teach in a particular sort of way or particular sort of topics. How can you bring that into line in order to achieve the type of curriculum that is required to make online teaching effective?
No, thank you very much. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Prof. Revenue, that moving online does not necessarily translate into taking that which you have and as it were, on a wholesale kind of fashion, transition into an online space. Because basically the transition requires the entire pedagogical shift, that requires you to understand that the whole notion of what anchors that which you are presenting is going to be driven by that particular pedagogy. That is at the core, really, of the work that we'll be doing. And of course, you're absolutely right that the curriculum in the context of all these changes is an area, of course, that also requires some immediate attention, because we can't simply just rest on our laurels and accept and assume that the curriculum as it was is in fact geared towards ensuring that we deliver that which is required by the world that is currently unfolding. The level of the precarious space that we currently have requires us, to venture into the space where we have to ensure that we begin to bring to bear that whole notion of having to move beyond just the confines, of disciplines as we used to know them in the past.
One of the
rather
things,
bring that whole notion of transdisciplinarity into the picture.
one of the things that you said, which really rang true for me, was that this whole thing is a work in progress. There's no end point. Universities have to be continually morphing to suit the, or to satisfy the requirement of the society in which they function. That you can't say, I've not got my university developed and that's it. It's only developed pro tem. Be changed again tomorrow.
You're absolutely right, Professor Mini. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
You know, my own approach is a simple one that says that we are a world in transition. So what is then supposed to be at the core of the way in which we operate must be understood within the same context. But what will then be the test of our success as universities is the agility that must be at the core of the manner in which we operate. Because the reason why we find ourselves being at odds with those who are critical of the work that we do is that they argue that we move at a snail pace. But there is no way in which the world can operate outside the drive of universities.
Yeah,
the beauty of universities is that that's where the real kind of thinking in a free kind of space happens.
Yeah.
That is not tainted by anything else. And it's important to influence the progression of things that are unfolding in the world, rather than the world seeing itself operating outside the space where we are.
I thank you again, and I'm sorry we have to move on, but I hope you'll be around for some questions later on. Thank you very much indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Prof. Remenya. Thank you so much also to all our delegates.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, now, the next talk is by Professor Phil Dover. Phil, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Well done. Phil is an emeritus professor at Babson College in Boston in Massachusetts in the USA. His academic and business interests lie in the management of high technology products, entrepreneurial studies, strategic market planning, etc. He has an extensive executive education experience leading programs on marketing, strategy, and corporate entrepreneurship. Phil, it's over to you. You have 12 minutes for the presentation.
Hang on, yes, I'm just getting the slides up. I'll just start at the end. I'll be right with you.
It is a very, very special trick to start your slides at the end and work to the front, I must say.
Yeah, I'd be very talented if I could achieve that. But there we go. Good. Thank you, Dan, and it's a delight to be here attending your conference. The title of my short chat is From Ivory Tower to Ecosystem Driver, Transforming the University Business Model. And my starting premise is that existing business model in universities and colleges is essentially broken. Late Clayton Christensen, who many of you will have heard of as a leader in disruptive innovation, believes that 50% of US universities and colleges will be out of business within a decade. It's a pretty profound statistic. Why would that be the case? The challenges are pretty straightforward. They're well rehearsed. In most universities, costs are now far exceeding revenue. We simply can't cover our costs, and this leads to the perfidious activity of war on talent, where dangerously schools slash tuition costs in order to fill the classroom. Secondly, there's the enormous impact of disruptive technologies. We're all familiar with those, online learning, AI, and the rest. Problem with that, of course, is that it is essential, especially with COVID, to invest in those technologies. Most schools, most universities, however, are laggards, far behind the curve, It is enormously expensive and difficult to catch up, if not impossible. And thirdly, the biggest challenge that I see is there is a changing expectation from society in general when asking the question, what is the value of higher education? A recent Economist study showed a fifth of UK graduates were better off not attending university. Okay, what are some of the solutions? There are some incremental solutions. One would be, how do we increase revenue? How do we increase enrollment? And there's ways to do that. We could play around with pricing. We could look to cost contain. We're seeing that in many universities now where we're, for example, removing tenure. We're using, in essence, the gig economy to hire faculty. We are using our facilities on campus for activities beyond educational activity. And finally, obviously, there is the need to invest in technology. I want to sort of go beyond that, however. I think it is clearly essential to invest in technology, but I want to move beyond the technical aspects of simply doing that and ask a sort of rather more fundamental question as to what are the strategic and moral implications of investment in technology. I think COVID has provided a once in a lifetime opportunity to reset society. The pursuit of clean technology and a high value economy. We learned a lot about what's called the triple bottom line: people, profit, and planet. The idea of moving beyond simply the bottom line in terms of profitability. There are absolutely profound implications for vice chancellors of universities of that perspective. That is, of taking a grand societal approach to problem solving. So, question, what business model adjustments should we make inside the university? Technology breaks down barriers between and within organizations, allows us to take multidisciplinary activities to problem solve these broader strategic challenges. So I'd like to suggest the notion then of ecosystems becomes incredibly valuable. What is an ecosystem? McKinsey, you've all heard of McKinsey, a complex network of interconnected businesses that depend on and feed on each other, deliver value to their customers, the end users and their stakeholders. And that is, the end is not possible to achieve by a single unit. It involves shifting semi-permanent relationships linked by the flows of data, service, and money, evolve over time. A perfect example of that would be the development of the Apple iOS platform into literally a multi-billion-dollar app community. So, a little bit about what ecosystems are. Why are they critical? Markets are rapidly deregulating. We have for-profit and not-for-profit universities. We have for-profit non-universities competing in our markets. Technology is blurring the distinction between products and services. Distance learning, for example, is now offered at home or in the office. Technologies are literally changing how our markets are served. We now have the ability, for example, to lecture using AI. Interesting question. What are the implications for the future of human lecturers and professors? So, how can universities then position themselves as ecosystem players? This seems to me to be an absolutely critical consideration and question. Universities need then to become innovative, multidisciplinary, entrepreneurial, and collaborative. The problem is there are so many barriers inside siloed existing universities, that is quite problematic to do. Take, for example, rigor versus relevance research debate. Most universities still apply to the rigor model, where in fact applications, prestige, status are the more important considerations rather than the contribution of research to society. So how can ecosystems then create and capture academic value? They need to explicitly position themselves within networks of customers, suppliers, and producers of knowledge-based services. Let's chat a little bit about how that can be done. I'm going to refer to these, and I've stolen this from MIT, our idea of entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem, because to me, those are the two critical activities that are required in order to successfully develop an ecosystem. The ecosystem that we know well, the technology-driven innovation hubs. This is where governments look to technological innovations as drivers for rational economic growth, with the universities acting as the incubator. We're familiar with MIT, we're familiar with Stanford, we're familiar with Cambridge. We've seen this wonderfully evolved in the situation of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine for COVID. However, much more interesting to the rest of us are the university-based ecosystems operating outside of these technology hubs. These are our universities. We don't live in a technology hub, and therefore we have to create the ecosystem to operate effectively. These are catalyzed by students, faculty, alumni, local entrepreneurs, and they respond to economic and societal challenges. They give back something to the local environment. Less interested in IP generation, more interested in the sharing, broad sharing of knowledge. And let me just give you examples of a couple of these. One would be the community-led model. Here, a great example of this is a company or a university I've been working with in Portugal, the University of Porto. Have a research unit called REMIT, and goal there of REMIT, it's a young research unit with the goal of providing applied knowledge to local and national society. For example, in Portugal, 90% of family businesses, 90% of businesses, startup businesses, are family businesses. They have no idea about technology. They have no idea about entrepreneurship. They know idea about starting up and running businesses, and therefore the university can forge a very successful and effective partnership with them in terms of resolving some of these issues. Second type of university-based ecosystem is what I call the top-down established university structures, which is working from the top down and building an organization based on the ecosystem approach. This often stems through research activities. A very good example of that would be Aalto University in Finland. They have a very focused institutional vision. Vision is around innovation, economic growth, employment, and well-being. And therefore all their research is in the area of ICT, materials, arts, and design. The important thing here is that the university has decided it can't be all things, all people. And therefore there's a need for focus, there's a need for differentiation, which is successfully attained through this extremely focused approach. So out of all of this comes, I think, some interesting observations. We need within the university to encourage the entrepreneurial mindset. What are some of the key success factors in order to do that? How do we get a university, often a stodgy, slow-moving, sclerotic organization, become entrepreneurial? Well, I think there's a number of guidelines. One is that I think you have a small number of change champions inside the organization. Those people are absolutely essential to be able to identify, and they could be anywhere within the organization. Avoid, if possible, the top-down approach to management structure. So, issue number one, experiment continuously. Try, fail quickly, learn, and adjust. You can do that with curriculum. You can do that with activity-based learning. You can do it with all sorts of teaching and research activities. Secondly, support your entrepreneurial leaders. There'll be a small number of those that you'll identify inside the organization. Support them and allow them to be the transformational thinkers inside of your organization. Collaboration, absolutely imperative, but collaboration both inside the organization, across your functions, across your divisions, and collaboration outside with multiple stakeholders. So lifelong connections or association with your various stakeholders is not linear. It's for the lifetime learning, building associations with, as I said, with all of your stakeholders. And finally, final success factor to identify of moving to this ecosystem approach is be market facing. Focus on opportunity recognition. Constant change means the need for new knowledge all of the time. And a lot of the data that will help you be market facing will not come from not inside the university, from your ecosystem partners. So, getting towards the end, how do we change? Changing the business system model, a key issue that we need to consider. Any institution has to search for competitive advantage. Traditionally, we search for competitive advantage with using what I've called the deep moat approach. That is, we strove to protect and grow the market share in a static market. We wanted to be insulated from competitors using our scarce resources, our brand names. The reality really is that has led increasingly to Me Too competition, and unfortunately, the role of price is the principal determinant of success or failure. Not a good situation to be in. So my argument would be that we need to rethink a strategic approach. And again, the use of a word, the idea of trying to create a metaphor, an image, the notion of turnstiles. What we should try to do is to continuously grow both the input and output dimensions of the market.
Phil,
So
I've got to say your time is almost up. 1 minute left.
okay, I'm almost finished. So this approach is basically saying that we are working within the network. IP, we're sharing, we're open source. Our goal is to grow markets, work together, and ensure that the market is larger and larger, new people, new products, new ideas, new innovations. Hard to do, very problematic. You'll face huge resistance inside the organization in terms of doing that. But my belief is that it is the way of the future. Therefore, in conclusion, welcome to the wonderful world of platforms and ecosystems. That is what I think will be the building blocks of universities in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. Phil, I'm afraid that that was a little bit of an overrun on time. I must say that I particularly enjoyed your comment about the opportunity to reset, which I firmly believe that if there's any positive thing to what's going on at the moment, it might be that it's going to force us to rethink what we're doing and therefore reset a number of issues in society that desperately need resetting. I also think your comment that we can't be all things to all people And that is one of the, it's another way of putting what I said earlier on about universities have grown too big. They become too complex, too trying to do too much and trying to do it all over the world at once. It really does
I
offer
hate,
some.
hate to be an advert, but I will be. If you look at Babson College, where I've taught for many, many years, it's become probably the premier school in the world for entrepreneurial studies. It is a small, very small college on the outskirts of Boston in a beautiful suburb called Wellesley. And yet it does it does many things. It does many things well. It does one thing superbly well. Most of its eggs are in that basket. That is dangerous to a degree if we ever to be shaken out of that premier position. It does mean that a lot of resources, a lot of thought going into expansion and the maintenance of that very strong position. And an awful lot of good entrepreneurial learning comes from sources like Babson College.
I'm sorry, I've got to move on because I would be
Okay.
delighted to talk to you, Phil, for the rest of the afternoon. But we'll perhaps talk in the discussion sessions later on. It's
Thanks
now
very
my
much.
pleasure. It's now my pleasure to introduce Nii Afuvezo. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Nii.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, correct.
He is a professor at university in Dubai, originally from Nigeria. Nii is taking you to my very short bio in the invitation. Is currently professor at the School of Health and Environmental Studies at Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University in Dubai. And his topic is on smart universities, and I'm really looking forward to hearing his views about how we can make smart universities, which I must say, I think we desperately need. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Prof. Remenyi, and to Luis for putting up this excellent forum for us to brainstorm and exchange ideas. My presentation is really looking at two components. We're discussing how the domains of smart learning and smart campuses can help to adapt to the influence of COVID-19 in shaping the universities of the future. And I'll end with some policy recommendations. I come from Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University, the first online university in United Arab Emirates. We have a population of about 10 million people in UAE, with 15 public universities and 75 private universities. Many of them are satellite campuses of established universities in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. The online situation in UAE is quite variable. Very few of the universities are actually working on an online platform, or we're working on an online platform until COVID-19 came up. So we'll be, in terms of the context, we have about 135,000 university students. And of this number, about 10,000 are having to move to other universities because the older ones found it difficult to adapt following COVID. And you can replicate this experience in many other countries. I've been following up in particular France and Australia. These are two countries where the students in particular are very reluctant to embrace the idea of online learning. And that may be because of the Greek architecture of this university. These are, very established, old school university approaches, and change for such universities in such settings has been particularly challenging. So what do we need to do? We've got COVID at hand. It's not going to go away in a hurry. And the changes that it's going to bring about are tectonic. They are not incremental. In other words, we are not going to go back to the old school, the old ways of doing things, even after we've got, widespread vaccination. So what should the universities of the future be looking at? We've looked at the University of South Africa model that was happily presented by Professor Makanya, talking about a lot of the things that are also included in my presentation, but in a different format. I look at smart campuses as extensions of smart cities. And we look at this as how do we adapt to the needs of the people, place? How do we unlock the potentials of technology and enable world-changing learning and research? It has 4 domains, which I'll talk about shortly. And I also look at smart learning in one word. It's about learning everywhere. It is ubiquitous. And one of the problems why we've got the shutdown leading to many students being unable to continue their learning is because the current model, which I'll call the old model, is rather static. It's not ubiquitous. The most important venue for learning is on the university campus. That cannot be sustainable in the post-COVID era. So when we look at education in the digital age, it's got to be personalized, it's got to be ubiquitous, and it's got to be adapted to the changing needs of society. So those are the 2 aspects that, and these 2 aspects are well illustrated in our approach at Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University. So let's look at the 4 domains of smart university campuses. There is the learner domain, and that includes also having a digitally literate academic student community. They need to be able to bring their own devices, and that implies some cost sharing. So while we have the university campus where we provided most of the learning equipment, with the online or the new digital age, the smart campus, the students are going to be co-contributing in terms of Wi-Fi. Professor Makanya talked about giving them data bundles. That's not going to be sustainable. So it will be reflected in probably lower fees. So this will help to eliminate the barriers to learning. And when it comes to the academic faculty domain, the key word is training. We need to ensure that our staff are very familiar with the new learning platforms. It's no longer going to be the brick and mortar classrooms. So getting that familiarity in place, learning about Moodle, Collaborate, Ultra, about Zoom, conferencing, and so on. These are things that will be in addition to the technical competencies of the faculty teaching in all fields, essentially. The 3rd domain is the curriculum domain. And Professor Remeni mentioned aspects of this in responding to Professor Makanya's speech. And it's about ensuring that we redefine our curricula to promote deeper, challenging, motivating learning tasks. Essentially, skills-based approaches to learning rather than just the knowledge-based didactic approach that is common in many universities currently. And the learning objectives need to be carefully crafted to reflect core knowledge, skills, and roles in real-life context. The 4th domain of smart campus is about the learning environment. The learning environment is going to be largely virtual. So we've got to be able to have interoperability. I talked earlier about bringing your own devices. It's got to be interoperable. And we have a smart campus at Hamdan bin Mohammed University where you can use virtually any mobile device, laptop, mobile phone, name it, and you can still get into our virtual learning environment. So we need to have ambient, intelligent environments. We need to also make use of a lot of the facilities that are in many of these learning platforms, like the Moodle platform. So we know that COVID-19 is a disruptive event with regards to tertiary education, but it can also have a silver lining in promoting transformation and a rebuilding of the university of the future as we look forward to the coming months and years. It exposes existing tensions regarding the value of university education. Professor Remy talked about the end of college, the book behind his desk. And people are beginning to say, well, the university provides more than just teaching. We also have the social interaction, and that is education in itself. And if we are also going to be co-contributing to our learning venues, why should we pay so much to learn online? So we need to look at a number of things to adapt to the new reality that was precipitated by COVID. The first is to redesign the learning environment ecosystem. So when we talk about curriculum development, the Commonwealth of Learning publication of last year looks at 7 steps. And the last 3 steps, selection of the learning experiences, should be as real life as possible. The organization of the learning experiences in an incremental fashion that will be more student-friendly or learner-friendly. Determination of what to evaluate. So this comes to assessments. These things will really need to be carefully configured because it's not going to be exactly something you can just replicate from classrooms. Take the case of internships. Virtual internship may work in some sectors, and I come from the medical public health field. When it comes to surgery, actually virtual learning has proved to be just as good in many aspects, where you can stream your surgery online, but it may not work for some other aspects, like with nursing and where some more hands-on training is required. Third, to transform the university experience into cyborg centers. So we're going to look at the university of the future as being intricately linked with technology. No technology, no university from 2021. So this pandemic, it offers a unique opportunity to reimagine education systems and actualize ideas by taking meaningful action to bring about this end future that we all look forward to. The university of the future needs to be smart in terms of its general infrastructure, that is the smart campus with its 4 domains, as well as the stakeholders devoted to optimal tertiary educational outcomes, the lecturers and the technology. Thank you, and I look forward to more discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And that's great to have the opportunity of being able to invite a question.
Yes, please.
If you have a question, please just unmute yourself and let's hear the question. Right, I have a question. You know, I have a daughter who did a master's degree a half a dozen years ago, and doing her research, she said to me, "How could you ever do research without the internet?" And the only answer I came up with was, well, with great difficulty. The way that the tools have developed have insinuated themselves into the academic way of life to such an extent that if we didn't have those tools, how could we function anymore? They have become just a question of the modus operandi of an academic is to think about having these sort of things available. The problem really arises is that there is an enormous range of quality in those tools and the availability of them and the use of them, and especially in the sense that not all the tools are not all the tools, and maybe many of the tools are not intuitive. They have to be you have to take time to learn them. We did a quick survey a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that came across was that a lot of academics were saying that they didn't get enough training as to how to use the tools optimally. So, I mean, moving to your smart university concept really does imply a lot of time, effort, and money going into the, shall we say, the rather invisible asset of getting your staff trained up properly. How do you see that, Nee?
Challenging, in one word. It is one of the things that actually distinguishes, as I said earlier, what's happening in France today, where most of the students believe they cannot learn outside of the brick and mortar university campus. What's happening in Australia today. I studied in Australia, and I know that we are configured towards this idea that, you know, everything has to be within the university campus. And this change has been so dramatic, and many, not just the students, the lecturers actually struggle. The 4 domains of smart university campus needs to be considered concurrently. We cannot just take one of them. So the domain of the teacher, I mentioned only the training, but also there are many things that that are included in that domain. How to have strong social presence on the internet. This is one of the big problems we had with the MOOCs. There was very weak social presence of facilitators. So in the teacher domain, it's not, the training has to encompass a number of aspects. Giving of feedback in online settings is not exactly the same as in bricks and mortar physical presence. You look at the curriculum domain, you've got to redesign a number of things. I mentioned briefly smart internships. It works for some areas, but it is inevitable in the COVID era. You cannot just send people to industry to go and learn when there are so many social distancing issues. So smart internships will have to be a blend, but technology will be playing a big role as the determinant of whether it succeeds or not, as we have seen with surgery.
Right.
Thank you.
I'd like to call Dr. Werner Kring to ask a question. Do you have a question, Werner?
Yes. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Avovesco. Really liked your presentation.
Thank you.
There's one thing I really, I mean, I'm also in the digital research, but there's one thing people forget about when they are really now driving this digital agenda. The reason why many people study at top universities, and I'm referring there to Harvard, Stanford, IESE, Spanish Business School, and also very good state universities in the UK, United States, including Henley, it's about relationship building. And the problem is, if we now drive the digital agenda and just argue, yeah, people are no longer willing to pay the price, we might overlook the fact that, of course, convenience and technology is one part, but your major motivation is also to build relationships in terms of founding startup, getting venture capital money. And therefore, I think in post-COVID-19, so we drive all this technology, which we can actually use to our benefit. We cannot oversee that a part of the future students still prefer face-to-face, and it will eventually kick back to a certain extent to normal because relationships are developed face-to-face. Yes, you can do that through Zoom, but I know that from my own life that you go to a very good university. I now have applied for a Harvard fellowship, and when I get accepted, I know it's not just about digital learning, it's about meeting the right people at the right time. So I think we need to get this a bit balanced instead of now going over the edge and saying, hey, everything is going straightforward to digital. And that's replicable to other industries as well, because the big ticket sales, which include also educational sales, are heavily decided through face-to-face. So you can mimic it through digital media. Okay.
I'm afraid I have to interrupt to keep to
Yes,
the time,
thank you.
time schedule. But
Thank you very much,
thank you for that. Nee's going to be here.
Just 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. Sorry, Prof. That the idea was COVID. COVID is what precipitated this rapid move. It used to be blended. At my university, we had 3 of the 15 sessions were physical, and the rest were online. With COVID, we had to move everything 100% online. Thank you.
Look, there's going to be time for more discussion during the small groups and also at the end. So may I please move on to the next presentation? Thank you very much, Nee.
Thanks very much, Prof.
So the next presentation is by Professor Pien McCoy. Have I pronounced your name correctly? Are you there? Professor Pine, is it Pine? P-M-P-I-N-E? McCoy. She was there earlier on, and I saw her, and I don't know where she's gone to. Hello.
Yes, Prof. Ramenya, she was there. I guess she's connecting now. Yeah, there she is.
She's connecting again. Well done. Where are you now?
While she's connecting, I'll just introduce her then. She's Mpine Magwe.
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 And she's going to talk about visionary paths of the University of the Future, right?
Yeah.
Are you
I'll
ready
let
to
her
go?
say.
Could you please put the camera on?
I think she's still connecting.
Who are you?
This is Portia Buthelezi. We are from the same university and we've worked together before. So while Professor Mpine Makwe was setting up, I thought to help you pronounce her name correctly.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, she's here.
Rightio.
Makwe, you may continue.
Please
Yes.
start.
Hi. My name is Mpine. Sorry, I just got disconnected just now. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just gonna set up right now, trying to open this to full screen so that I can share my screen. I'm just about to share my screen. Where is it? From the beginning, okay. My presentation is, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, my presentation is on the visionary paths, the future of universities. For the past maybe 5 or so years, I've been involved in the University of the Futures Network, where we were looking at the University of the Future even before and trying to figure out what is it that we need to do, and also responding to what is happening. And when people are saying universities are irrelevant, universities are no longer doing what we're supposed to do. So we are a research team from that. I want to start with this quote from Alvin Toffler, one of the well-known futurists, who said the future always comes first and always in the wrong order. While we're still looking at how things are done, and while we're still researching what the future of university looks like, and many people not even thinking that technology will have such an impact, COVID came. And it came and it made everything change, including the use of technologies. Online learning has been around for more than 30 years. And in distance education, where I come from at UNISA, we have been involved in teaching people at a distance for many, many years, for more than 100 years. However, it only took COVID to change the whole higher education sector, to look at how should we rethink about our vision and mission, as the previous speakers have spoken about. What is it that we need to do? How do we redefine ourselves? And I'm going to focus mainly on the social justice mandate, because when I'm looking at the University of the Futures, I look at it from the African context where distance education, or ODL, is positioned within a social justice mandate of accessibility, equitability, and also to make sure that the curriculum is also inclusive. So some of those things are very critical to the open and distance learning environment at which we are working on. So the mission, our mission, is to ensure that that happens. And we need to repurpose in terms of looking at workable solutions for developing context, because sometimes when we look at things from external, we forget about our developmental context. So Africa has its own challenges. We know that there's a big need of massification of higher education, and a lot of people who seek spaces in higher education, and a lot of them cannot have access to higher education, especially contact universities. We don't have enough contact universities to accommodate many people who want access to higher education. And we also know that the more people, when people are engaged in higher education, and the more people are engaged in higher education, the likelihood of that country will grow in terms of the economic growth. So we know that that is important, that higher education plays a critical role. While we are still dealing with that, then digital revolution came in. And as it came, it changed so much. It changed the way we speak, the way we do things, the way we interact, the way we date. Even the way we date, even the way we get married these days, given COVID, the rise of COVID. However, there's this biggest problem that we have of unequal access because of poverty, because of a whole lot of other things. And at the same time, there's a big need for skills in the knowledge economy. Hence, we need to reform the education system. We need to transform it completely as we had inherited it from our colonial masters, because many of our education systems are still based on what the British and the French and all these people who colonized us. So we need to reform and transform our education system in order to address certain issues that are developmental in nature, issues that deals with our own economies, that deals with our own social issues, that deals with our own health issues as well. Now, why is it important for us to educate for the future? Education, the nature of education is about future. When someone walks into a classroom, they walk in because they want to learn in order for them to get something, to get a job. It is also about upward mobility. It's all about those things. So it's important for the development, not of only for an individual, but it's also a development of the country, the economic growth of the country, by extension, the region. And social cohesion in this continent, social cohesion is very, very important when we look at peace issues, when we look at other issues that impact heavily, when we look at poverty, that impact heavily on what we do. Now, in this community of future researchers, we use research methodology, future research methodology, where we try to envision how the future would look like, with the aim of creating strategies to realize that world. to identify desirable features that are worth strengthening. And I'm glad that colleagues have spoken about that in terms of the business model. What are these that we need to strengthen? What are threats that are needed to be eliminated? And maybe threats is the mindset, and it's just the way we are doing things that needs to be eliminated in order for us to develop certain things differently. And most importantly, to articulate assumptions about the future in order to guide our current decisions. So when you deal with future, you have to look at the present in order for you to be able to look at the desirable future. What is it that we have in the present? And for some reason, COVID has just catapulted us to that level where all of a sudden future is here and we haven't even prepared for it. While we're still looking at the SDGs for 2030, Africa we want for 2063, all of a sudden we had to come back and deal with this quickly. Now, in the beginning, when we started dreaming, imagining higher education, this was before COVID-19, and these were the research that came out of it. Technological developments, openness and flexibility. Yes, we were buying into that, and we're talking about it quite a lot. Knowledge and content is available for free. How do we get into that to make sure that that becomes part of the future? The merging of formal, non-formal, and informal education, very strong. And in future, we will have to look at issues of recognition of prior learning and the high demand for continuous capacity development. We see it now. For the knowledge economy, we need to capacitate people differently. And there's demonstration of capability rather than an ability. And capability and ability will be most needed in future than the certificates that we get. And the globalization, of course, with students' mobility, people moving from one place to the other. Then during we ran another study during the COVID in May, June. And this is the results that came out, that we need to strengthen blended and online learning. And all of a sudden, blended and online learning was right at the forefront. People were talking a lot about it. It was not a far-fetched dream. It was something that is happening now and that we need to strengthen in order for us to move forward in higher education. Personalization and customization of what students will need. We'll have students who have had an opportunity of being exposed to other forms of learning, and therefore they will be demanding. They will expect certain things. And obviously the use of digital technologies will be accelerated. And again, the issue of open education is very close to my heart because it deals with the principles that address social justice, which is one thing that we need to address in a developing context, in the African context, where it is very, very important that education should be equitable, it should be inclusive, and also it should be accessible to as many people as possible. The pooling of knowledge of technological resources, absolutely important. Working together with the industry, and this has shown during COVID that universities started, even my university started talking to the mobile providers to find out if we cannot get free data for students and all those things. So that collaboration with big industries is going to be even much more needed now, because then industries have to tell the universities that this is what is needed in the knowledge economy. Lifelong learning, I cannot overemphasize that the university with 4-year degrees is going to be something that we need to reconsider. 3 or 4-year university will need to consider and start offering new knowledge and skills that are needed, short 3-month certificates. And I see this as someone picking up a basket, going shopping for different things that they need and putting it together. Some universities will change and just be an examining body, or the RPL universities who look at what people have in terms of skills, in terms of their capacity to put together a program. So the program may not be put from us, but by individual people. All these need strong leadership that that is absolutely crucial to drive innovation. It needs also political will. Political commitment is absolutely important. We cannot have this without political commitment from different stakeholders, different people, not only the government. In Africa, many of the countries, many of the higher education is supported by the government, but you also need the government to work with other stakeholders. Policy development, absolutely important. We can't do strategies without policy. Funding from the government, absolutely necessary. But the most important thing is the change of mindset. If we want to strive for an education system that is inclusive, equitable, accessible, and that enables parity of participation to achieve the education we want. If we are not ensuring the parity of participation by means of making sure that people have access to all these equipments, lovely gadgets that we are talking about, there will be no inclusive education that is also equitable and accessible to all. Thank you very much. I was running through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know you did extremely well on time there. Look, you said so many interesting things. It's hard to know where to begin. But look, the thing that I find so obvious, and you just said it, I say it all the time, and yet for some reason, society just doesn't pick this up. It is just so obvious that the better the education, the more chance there is of having a prosperous society.
Mm.
And that education must certainly not be restricted to just the elite sectors of the population. It must be made as available as possible. And yet we see in so many countries around the world, fees going up and obstacles being put in for people to get the education. And then you look at countries like Germany and the Netherlands and the Nordic countries where it's almost free or almost free. And then people say, but we can't afford to do that. Well, then how can those countries afford to do it? They can afford to do it because they know it is such an important part of a society. Anyway, thank you very much for re-emphasizing that again. I mean, it is so fundamental. You mentioned this question of mindset. I mean, I think it's so important that, as Phil Dover said earlier on, is that, that this COVID-19 is an opportunity to reset our way of thinking. And hopefully that we'll all get a chance of doing things differently. I get very annoyed when people say, "Oh, we're going to bounce back." I want us to bounce somewhere else, not bounce back, bounce to a better place. And the other comment that I was very encouraged by you saying that you can't really know the future without knowing the present. I would take that one step further. I don't think you can know what the future can possibly hold without knowing the past as well as the present. That we really have to develop and build on what we have. Now, Anthony Beziel has asked a question. The question is, how do you define better education? And then was there anything more to that question? Because it flashed on my screen and disappeared. Let me just see.
Well, do I need to respond to that?
Yes, please do.
I personally, I think that an education must address the needs of the community it serves. It must, in the context of developing countries where education has been distant from what it needs to serve, I think education must address the developmental needs. And hence, it's important that it is accessible to many people as possible. And it is also, and that's why I mentioned the political will, because it's only when the governments of the countries in our context decide to invest heavily in an education system to ensure that the education is relevant, it addresses our needs. Maybe this is the time when we have to look very closely what our needs are. What is it that we need to do in order for us to generate the education system that will talk to us. And because I've been doing this future research for a while, maybe just 1 minute, when you look at how education came to being throughout historically, it was addressing a specific need. And even the education system that was introduced in the African continent, it was there on the basis of addressing the colonial need at the time. And we cannot continue with a colonial type of education when we are trying to develop. So it is important that we need to rethink or even reimagine what this Africa would look like, not only in terms of technologies, those are easy to get, but in terms of what the curriculum, what is it that we are the curriculum, the instruction, and what is it that we want to achieve from the education sector so that it becomes relevant. Right now, we have many people who are not employed, and yet they have degrees and very fancy degrees at that. Do we need that? Do we need something different?
Look, there's so many other issues that stem out of that, and the issue of decolonization of education is really a very significant one, and one that is so badly understood. Hopefully that might come up in the small groups or in the final session today. Mm-hmm. In keeping to time, we've got to 2 o'clock, and okay. Louise's. And thank you again very much. I really did appreciate your presentation. There are some more questions there, and you can access the questions yourself and directly connect the individual to us. Okay. Louise, I believe, is here, and she, would everybody come back to room 1? I can't actually communicate that to them, but hopefully Louise will get them back into room 1, and we can then start doing some work in small groups. The idea in the small groups is to exchange some ideas, and it's also a good networking opportunity for you, everybody, to meet others interested in this topic, and perhaps you can exchange contact details, etc. I've just been told that room 2 are going to have 2 minutes more of questions. Let's just let me just as we have 2 minutes, it's such a short amount of time to do anything. I think we're being brought back.
Oh.
One of the questions that came up, is it Mpini? Is that the correct way to pronounce it?
Mpini, yes.
Mpini. Mpini, one of the questions here is a perennial one about, does massification of education mean a deterioration in the quality of education? And of course, I don't see it that way, as long as you are clear about the objectives that you want to achieve, and you can therefore have everybody on board. Yeah. They won't all get the same deliverable, but they'll get what they need, one hopes. Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't see massification of education and also we need to think about what quality is, because what we look at quality, we often look at it in terms of Harvard and all those places. Those places have very few people and are very selective and who gets into their universities. And massification is not about that. It's about enabling people to get in, but they need to be successful. And it's important, again, to look at what is our definition of quality. And it cannot be the same. It has to be based on the mission of the institution. It has to be based on the vision of the institution, so that people who work in that place understand what the vision and mission of the institution entails and what they need to do to ensure that those who come in as part of the massification drive are also going out successfully.
Yeah, yeah. Now, is Louise here?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay, are we ready to?
We haven't had an increase in numbers from the other group, but we could get started and then have them join groups as they come across.
Yes, okay, let's do that. Let's get going. We do have limited time on the whole event. So are you going to now, you're going to break everybody up into groups of 6?
Yeah, if you just bear with me a few minutes, we'll work out how many people will be in each group, but about 6.
Okay. So in the meantime, let me just look at the charts and respond.
Mpini,
Yes, sir.
on that question of what is a good education, there is a particularly good video available on YouTube of Chomby, Noam Chomby from MIT, who talks about what constitutes a good education. And I must say it's very impressive. Now, he doesn't take exactly the approach you took, which is, you know, that it's community related. He looks at it from the point of view of giving an individual or encouraging an individual to develop his or her thinking skills.
Yeah.
And so it's not a question. Well, one of the things that bothers me is that very often universities have very busy curricula. They fill it full of all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, I don't think volume can ever compensate for quality.
No.
And so what you really wanted perhaps is teach smaller things, but as a smaller number of things, but to teach them in a more penetrating sort of way. But just mention that. Yeah, mention that.
I agree. I remember someone from the UK used to say, teach people how to learn, then they will learn everything that they need to learn.
And also teach them that it's good to learn as well. Get them interested in learning.
I always remember that teach every a person to learn, they will learn anything.
Oh, Hi there.
Hi, we are trying